It was the night when the bright light pierced to the cold sky hovering above. A night when something had changed within the city, or so that he felt, as he himself felt a change in him, that he had been seeking desperately ever since that fateful accident that clutched its claws in him, refusing to let him move forward. Now he had this strange ability to see in the hearts of people that he encountered. And there he found bugs that preyed on them, snatching away their joy and shouting a dark cloud over them. He has this strong urge to eat those bugs in order to quench his thirst and free them of their burden, and what he found was his actions resulted in giving joy to the people. This momentary thrill not only excited him, but he finally found a way to fulfill his childish goal of being a hero. He had a purpose, again and again eating away bugs and tearing them apart in such a flurry that he had gotten addicted to being that hero. And now, eating bugs became a necessity. His clouded pleasure had made him look away from the strange things going around, or rather, he chose to ignore them. But soon he realized the bugs stopped coming, and he had this awful feeling that he was being watched as if he was committing an act he shouldn't have. Unsure of his actions, he ran and ran until he found painfully that bugs that he was eating were bad memories that everyone shared. And by eating those memories, he was erasing those parts of the people, including his own mother, as he finally looks at himself and finds a man filled with deep remorse, still unable to move forward and trying to clutch to those memories. This was the second episode of Boogiepop Phantom, a Madhouse anime released in 2002 and a direct sequel to the first and sixth novel of the series Boogiepop and Others, written by Kohei Kitano, who was also involved in the production of the live-action movie adaptation and the anime, both released around the same time. While the film and the new 2018 anime were direct adaptations of the novel, this was quite unique in that it was meant to be a sequel while also a standalone work, sharing the cast and many themes of the series, albeit with a darker, horror tone. The way the show is presented is so strange that I really struggle to pinpoint something beyond the obvious comparisons of David Lynch and Serial Experiments Lane, stylistically. The closest one I can make is trip hop, which is a music genre quite popular at the time and was also a huge inspiration on other Japanese media around that period, like the Silent Hill games. It dictates how the show chooses to present its themes, often keep cutting back and forth between moments in an extremely non-linear fashion. There is no main character or a conventional story, neither an ending that most would find satisfying. Rather, one can say that the city itself is the main focus. You are thrown in between the events that one wouldn't fully grasp unless familiar with the novels. So the experience of viewing Boogiepop is watching snippets of different characters across time as you observe them and their arcs in an attempt to solve the puzzle to ultimately decipher what the show is trying to say to you. The sound is very crucial in creating that tone that permeates in the way the narrative is structured, often painting strokes that enhance already quite intricate moments and combine different elements quite well into a perfect rhythm that keeps you engaged and feel like a part of the collective conscious of the world presented. During my rewatch past month, I had found a new appreciation for the work. In my experience, the themes of memory, change became quite apparent. It's a city amidst a conflict between three entities: the Towa organization, who seek control, and a desire to stop change; Echoes, who represent this abstract idea of transcendence that humanity is driven by; and finally Boogiepop, the titular character, a mysterious figure looming over the city who is caught between that conflict while the city deals with the consequences of that conflict and trying to live. It also deals with a fascinating and quite niche subgenre of horror, that is existential horror. One of the most popular understandings of horror is the fear of the unknown, and a lot of media deals with that in different ways, whether it be the cosmic or the worldly horror that human brain can't comprehend, or just simple day-to-day paranoia one faces. But the concept of existential horror in a way is the opposite of that, where the realization and acceptance of the state of the world, or aptly, one's situation at present and their helplessness and the inability to affect it in any way, leads to this excruciating type of fear that can be soul-crushing. It can be very broad and encompass so many things because by definition it is a feeling that originates from one's doubt about their reality, which can be very broad and hard to truly quantify, which is why that subject is not only interesting but way more relevant depending on how you perceive it. I have not seen a lot of media explore it, or at least the ones that do aren't typically associated with a traditional understanding of horror, which for the most part is based on a collective agreement of an idea of horror aesthetically. It also brings up an interesting conversation conversation surrounding our fascinations around genres, and how the very idea of limiting art to a specific set of narrative beats or expectations can be blurry, and verges on suggesting that a work which explores human condition should have specific emotions or premises. For example, The Lighthouse can simultaneously be the funniest and scariest film depending on the person. That said, I do understand why genres are popular, but also, due to that, more broad abstract ideas like existential horror usually struggle to fit in. Lars von Trier's Melancholia is a great example that I've rarely seen anyone talk about as a work of horror, even though it can be just as unsettling as any acclaimed horror film of the past decade, in the heart of which is the tale of two sisters reacting to the feeling of melancholia in different ways. What's especially scary to me is how their situation isn't presented as something tragic. On the contrary, their lives are seemingly very good, and that is what's interesting to me, because a horror like that can be so abstract in cases where one can or cannot comprehend this feeling. Maybe it's a dissatisfaction about your life, or it could just be complete indifference, and nothing really ever takes that feeling away. Justine has accepted her reality and is quite content with her fate as the world is ending, while her sister is unable to relate to her and is terrified by that same reality. Whether she wants to live or is repressing some aspects of her doesn't matter. Both allegorically and literally, she is experiencing something that both terrifies her and gives a feeling of hopelessness. In that sense, existential horror can be anything that presents one with a situation so unmeasurably grand that it feels suffocating, with no clear answer in sight, just the experience. It results in one questioning life that can come through introspection, or more importantly, when faced with different things like suppression of one's identity, authoritarian regimes, loneliness, dissatisfaction, or the political landscape of the world, etc. These factors together present a wall that's hard to break down. In a different case, Fall in my opinion is another example of it. Take the 1988 film Grave of the Fireflies. It's both heart-wrenching and horrific, where the horror comes to the realization of Satan about the fate of himself and his sister, as they find themselves alone with no one to talk to, completely abandoned as they are faced with a situation that is so above them. Satan struggles to truly comprehend the farcical nature of war, while being a victim of it. Any good war, or rather anti-war film, is a great example of this horror, because that is the reality of that absurd recurring demon haunting us that we have no control over. And the scariest part is how even after countless such films and messaging, we are still living in 2024 under such tragic conditions. Boogiepop Phantom similarly explores this topic by presenting a world where the characters, who all in their different ways find themselves at certain pivotal moments in their life, usually dealing with alienation, detachment, trying to hold on to a dear memory, or just struggling to move forward. One of the more interesting episodes of the show was about Boom Boom, a recurring character whose goal again is to help humanity in a way they seem fit, and their way towards that is by sending people back to moments when they were happy, or burdens of being an adult, trying to fit just weren't present, and the world was much simpler when the adults are sent back to their childhood self. Or a more succinct interpretation would be giving people long lost memories of happiness, but everyone reacts to that quite differently. Some love the escapist momentary fantasy that they can escape to, while others, in the case of Saki, it doesn't go as well. When a glass even shatters, she's again back to her reality. And what's more interesting to me about this episode is how we never really see what she herself wanted. Piano was something that she was good at, and was scared of disappointing her parents. She finds herself at a crossroad where the weight of those expectations overpower her will to live, and soon gives in. As the show ends, we are focusing on three focal characters reacting differently to graduating from high school. This is fascinating not only because we are both at the end of the series as the girls are in their high school journey, and there is this short moment of reflection where they look back at the events that have happened as they try to move forward with that fate. Considering how change is a very important idea present in the show that affects everyone in some way, this is how the show brings it forward. After rewatching the show last month and going through the novels, I was amazed by how relevant the work is in the current world. Following the horrific US election result, I thought Cardano had captured a world filled with dread that resembles us more than ever. So many people are rightfully anxious and terrified by how the future shapes. The different elements of the world perfectly captures an aspect of the reality in 2024. You have people who seek control and a selfish desire to stop change as it benefits them, and this abstract idea of transcendence that humanity is driven by, and the conflict of those forces brings up this dread as we ponder on the future in a world so divided and driven by hate. It's something that in real time makes you quiver as you're presented a reality surrounded by fascists and helpless, ignorant, selfish people brewing hate and contempt for others and themselves. We are all trapped in this existential dread, questioning the world and trying to find hope amidst all the darkness. When I look at Boogiepop, the character is shrouded in mystery. It comes and goes at random intervals and provides comfort to those who need it. And in some ways, I feel like that is the show and Cardano himself trying to say that even in a world so detached and pale, the idea of this magical occurrence saving us, the hope that everything will work out, connects to this deep braveness that seeks to find comfort. Boogiepop being so abstract is almost like a canvas in how we can view them, depending on our own situation. Do I think that the show has a straight answer to that, or that it's saying one day a Shinigami will magically appear and save us? No, and that to me enhances the show, cause well, Cardano himself isn't sure as he has hinted through the entire existence of Boogiepop, cause it's just not as simple as any one answer. The reality is we don't have any control over these entities, but that doesn't mean to give up, rather finding answers in different ways. And Boogiepop represents that idea as a canvas that you can fill, and it can be anything from just showing basic empathy to whatever you can do that eases you just a bit while forming a community. Making this video is some way for me to find that comfort, and I hope you find it yourself. She wakes up with the sound of deafening cries in a dark, cold night. She sits by the window with hands trembling and a heart racing at the sound of those tears streaming down the roof. She wonders when the night is gonna end as she looks at the wall as another year passed by, but the sun never came. She looks out the window again and the girl is confessing her love to a ghost. The sound of tears are ramping up and the floor beneath her feet dissipating. She looks out the window as a man kills the last girl. The tears have filled up the room and the ghostly choir is screaming for help, but she has forgotten her way out as she hears a man calling for a girl named Ray. Distraught, she picks up a diary as she calls out for an angel of death as the window is shattered by glowing butterflies calling her out. Down a dark alleyway she runs desperately as she hears a grave battle taking place somewhere.